what you missed from the president's first press conference, another toilet paper shortage, and this one not related to the pandemic, and Love Hate 8 to end the week. Friday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Friday, March 26th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
Happy Friday, Jill, and happy Passover Eve to you and everyone who celebrates. Have you made Seder plans this year?
Yes. So this is the second Passover of the pandemic. The first one was primarily a Zoom Seder. I'm sure you saw some pictures on social media. Actually, you're not really on social media, but yes, that was what was it. All over my feed. We're going to be doing some of it in person this year. Most of my family completely vaccinated. So that's
excellent.
Just good. Yes.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's great.
Yeah. So, and it's one of those things. So I was wondering, even in February, I was like, what is the second Passover of this pandemic going to bring? And it's nice that there's a little bit of progress, a lot of progress, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of, I guess, progress on COVID and all things President Biden, he opened his first formal press conference by announcing that the new vaccine goal is 200 million doses in his first 100 days, up from 100 million. But that was the extent of the discussion about the pandemic. And I do want to note, I always thought that the goal of 100 million doses was ridiculously low.
Yeah.
That was basically the pace that we were doing under the Trump administration. So just for context there. The rest of that press conference focused mostly on immigration, filibuster reform, voting rights, and foreign policy. Biden called attempts by Republicans to limit voting rights, quote, sick and un-American, just as Georgia passed sweeping new restrictions. He blamed the Trump administration for the overcrowding at border facilities and said that the government was doing everything possible to treat migrant children humanely. He also said his expectation is that he will run for re-election in 2024.
We got to talk more about this new bill in Georgia at some point, maybe next week when the governor probably signs it into law. It's unbelievable. I mean, they made it a crime in Georgia to hand out water to voters waiting online at the polls. I mean, how could anybody endorse that as anything other than just straight up anti-American? But anyway, going back to Biden, look, hey, he went the whole time without praising white supremacists. That's a win, right? Chalk that one up. But back to what you said earlier, I thought that was amazing. Nobody asked a question about the pandemic. So he made the 200 million announcement sort of like on his own. It wasn't in a response to a question. Somebody asked him about if he's running in 2024. Nobody asked him about COVID, this thing that has upended every aspect of our lives and is still ongoing. Am I crazy to think that this is still like the number one story in the world, that Americans would rather know when they're getting their vaccines than what his thoughts on the filibuster are? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people really have moved on. But I would like to get that memo because I would like to make some plans if COVID's no longer an issue. But anyway, yeah, this whole thing was just I think it was a great showcase of the problems in sort of the American media right now, in the press, particularly in the White House press corps, which is really just in withdrawal without Donald Trump on the scene. And, if you've looked at the cable news ratings lately, they have absolutely fallen off a cliff. Trump, for whatever he was very good for the media. And, I think they're trying to sort of relive that without him to kick around.
I guess you could argue that a lack of questions about the pandemic shows that there's been some type of progress in this country. That things are running well. Usually you ask as a member of the press, you usually want to know about something that's not going well. So you're talking right now, 3 million doses or 2.5 million doses going into arms every single day. It reminded me, though, of the CNN Democratic debate for the primaries. I don't know if you remember, it was February of last year. And it was quite clear to anyone paying attention, especially to us, that coronavirus was going to be a life-altering type of thing in this country. There was not one question about the pandemic.
I remember that.
Okay, until Michael Bloomberg brought it up himself halfway through. They were focusing on some political debate with some
Yeah.
fighting, I think I remember, between Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg. And talk about the DC press corps being so out of touch with what Americans actually care about that
I remember.
I mean, how they didn't open that debate with a question about coronavirus just blew my mind. Speaking of COVID, though,
I remember texting with you about that actually when that happened because that was back in February of last year when we were like, this is like a big deal and getting bigger by the day. And then watching that and just being like, I'm sorry, am I missing something here? Like, are we not on the precipice of like a major news story? Yeah, amazing. Really. I'm glad you brought that
So I
up.
just Googled it. I actually Googled it because I wanted to make sure that it was February and not January. Because January, I guess you could excuse that because it still was early on in the pandemic. But no, it was actually the middle to the end of February, which means COVID was here, and it was certainly in Europe. And there was not one question about it. And it was just kind of one of those head scratching things. And it's like, if you're watching, what do you care about? Do you care about why Elizabeth Warren hates Michael Bloomberg? Or do you care about
Right.
what these candidates are going to do about a pandemic? All right, let's talk a little bit about COVID. Cases, unfortunately, back on the rise nationally, up about 10% week over week. Hospitalizations and deaths remain on the decline nationally, although a handful of states are seeing an uptick in deaths. Florida opening up vaccine eligibility to all adults on April 5th. California on April 15th. More than 30 states now plan to drop all eligibility requirements by mid-April. That would be ahead of President Biden's May 1st goal.
Nothing from New York yet, right?
No,
I don't think
it's
on
still
eligibility.
just 50 and older.
Yeah, I thought that this was a really good headline from the Associated Press yesterday. The headline read, "Weaned on Hollywood endings, Americans now face a messy one." And the story was sort of making the point that we were making about the plane analogy, about how this is, it's going to be a bumpy landing, but we are landing. So anyway, I just thought that was a clever headline. But cases, by the way, are on the rise globally. This thing is completely out of control in Brazil. We haven't really talked about the situation down there in a while. They're closing in on 300,000 deaths, second only to the United States. And I mean, this is a global threat, right? Because Brazil is a gigantic country. And there's basically now just unmitigated spread, which is going to end up incubating new variants. Right. All the more reason why the vaccine, just the global vaccine rollout has got to get going better.
Well, Brazil has not approved any vaccines.
Is that true? I didn't know that.
There's a lot of finger pointing going on in that country when you dig deep into what's actually going on. But I think the bigger point that you make about potentially new variants emerging because the spread is so out of control, if for somebody listening going like, why do I care what's going on in Brazil? That's why you care, because those variants inevitably will make their way to this country. And there's a big question mark as more variants emerge if the vaccines are going to work against them. Pfizer, by the way, testing their vaccine on children as young as 6 months old. And the goal, they say, is to potentially have shots in the arms of the older kids by the start of the school year in the fall. They're going to actually, in terms of, if you're wondering like how it works in terms of process, so they actually start with a smaller dose and see if the kids could tolerate that in terms of side effects and if it produces enough of the antibodies to protect them against COVID, and then slowly increase the dose and go from there. So
Moderna's doing the same thing.
Switching gears, marijuana could be legally bought, sold, and used right here in New York as soon as next year. New York state lawmakers have agreed on a deal to legalize recreational cannabis for adults. The deal is billed as a restorative justice initiative, with its plan to reserve licenses for minority business owners and direct some of the tax revenue back to communities that have been especially hard hit by the war on drugs. The state legislature expected to pass the bill as soon as next week. Governor Cuomo expected to quickly sign it into law.
Imagine that. People in New York City are going to be smoking pot on the streets openly. Wow. That's a joke because everybody already is doing that.
I was going to say, I thought that was already happening.
Yeah, Brooklyn is basically becoming open air, like it's amazing. It just smells like pot everywhere. I don't know if it's just a pandemic thing that everybody is now smoking weed, but you just smell it constantly when you go out now. What was I going to say? Oh, I thought that this was sort of an interesting. We were talking about Ralph Northam yesterday. This was sort of the Northam playbook that Cuomo is now in on. Under the terms of this bill, by the way, weed delivery and Amsterdam type coffee shops will be permitted. I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't even think California has that. I don't know if have you ever been to Amsterdam?
I haven't. No.
It's a cool city, but their big thing is they let you go into these places and you can like drink a nice cappuccino and smoke a joint, but no alcohol served. So anyway, that's the plan for New York to have these things. But look, if there's any state that can utterly mess up something like this, it is the Empire State. So we'll have to see. It'll take a while for them to actually get this, get the particulars in order.
All right, let's switch gears here. The man charged with killing 10 people at a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado, made his first court appearance. A judge ordered him held without bail. The suspected gunman's defense lawyers say they believe that he has some kind of mental illness, as his family described him as paranoid and antisocial. The owner of the store that sold him a gun just days prior to the shooting says he did pass a state background check. More stories about the survivors of that shooting are coming out, including the story of a barista who saved his elderly coworker by throwing her behind a trash can as soon as he heard the gunshots.
Mental health is that's something that we really can't overlook in these shootings. And a few people wrote in to make that point the other day, and it's important. Obviously, like the number one problem we have with these things is the access to guns, but we also really do have, Jill, a serious mental health crisis in this country, especially when it comes to young men. What do these shooters always have in common? Well, first of all, they're almost always young men, but they're always none of them have friends, right? I mean, I'm not saying that if you're like a young male and you're kind of a loner, that makes you a violent psychopath, but almost all of our violent psychopaths are young male loners. And there's something to be said about that. I mean, if you add in a broken social safety net, bad or just, parenting that isn't up to snuff, easy access to these weapons of war, what do you expect is going to happen? I'm just trying to make the point that this is a big issue. It's not just an issue about guns. And I'm terrified really about the long-term repercussions of COVID on this generation of young people, especially young men, teenage boys. There's a lot of kids, a lot of young boys who maybe they're a little bit socially distant or awkward to begin with. What happens when they go a year without really any social interactions, right? In a time when they're really trying to make it out on their own and try to, starting to talk to girls or starting to make friends in school. I don't know. I don't really know what the answer to that is. It's just something that's been on my mind lately.
Yeah, look, it's why experts expect, unfortunately, that the level of these mass shootings is going to rise even above the pre-pandemic levels, which is just frightening. Yeah. One of the things that struck me from yesterday is that his family was the one who's saying he has mental illness. Well, there are a lot of reports that this guy was playing with that gun that he bought in his house, and that his family was like, you got to put that thing away. Forget putting it away. How did they not take it away from him? And say, if you have a mental illness and that's going to be part of your defense, then it's a big enough mental illness that this guy, you should know that this person should not have a weapon of mass destruction. I mean, come on. That's just so incredibly. Look, as always, what happens with this stuff is that you figure out that there were 1,000,001 points along the way that this could have been prevented.
Sure. Yep.
And this is one of them. So I'm frustrated.
It's
I can't imagine what the family members of those victims must be thinking.
Yeah.
Overseas, officials say it could take weeks to get the Evergreen container ship unstuck from the Suez Canal. That 200,000-ton ship remains wedged perpendicular across the canal, completely blocking one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Now the big guns are coming in. A legendary Dutch firm that's responsible for some of the most daring naval salvages ever has been hired to lead the removal efforts. Even without the Suez blockage, the world's biggest producer of wood pulp is warning that we're on the precipice of another global toilet paper shortage due to the lack of containers to ship it in. So we did a little bit of a pivot there. But
it's all part of the same story, though. It's all part of the same story, which is like our shipping industry is just in incredible. It's just being overburdened by everybody ordering everything now on the internet and everything like that. By the way, Jill, the Suez Canal getting blocked on the eve of Passover, that's a little on the nose, isn't it? I mean, it didn't work out so well for everybody the last time the Red Sea was parted like that, right? The Passover joke.
I'm just thinking though about I that was very cute, Carlo. But
So,
I'm thinking about though, um, these that ship. Have you seen the picture from yesterday of that massive ship with like there was like almost like one
yeah,
digger, like from
the
a
little backhoe.
construction site
Yeah,
trying to dig it out. And I'm thinking it reminded me, my parents bought my daughter this little truck, like a little dump truck type of thing with a shovel on it, tiny, like a little tiny one. And she was so excited. And they were taking a walk around when there was snow on the ground. And she was trying to kind of shovel with this little toy.
oh,
And my parents, it was just so cute because she thought she was going
right.
to kind of make a dent and she had the best time. But it was like, that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah,
It was like, this is your plan? This is your plan? This
right.
is going to take 3 years.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about with this, I just love this story, even though it's actually like it's a big deal what's happening over there. But imagine you're in one of these ships and like you're going through the Suez. Your home port is in the Mediterranean. You've been on the open waters for like weeks. You're basically like 100 miles from home, and now they're just like, hold up, you can't go through. You're gonna have to go around Africa. It's like when there's construction and they make you take a detour, but the detour is 5,000 miles.
It's just incredible. And it's just the way this ship is in there. I'm scared for how long it's going to take and what the
They can
repercussions
see
are
it.
going to be.
You can see it from space. When was the last time you made a mistake that you could see from space, right?
I hope never to make a mistake that you can see from space. Many people mourning the loss today of Jessica Walter, best known for playing Lucille Bluth in Arrested Development. Walter was a working actor over 6 decades, starring in films and TV shows alongside Clint Eastwood and William Shatner. But it was her role as the sarcastic and manipulative matriarch of the Bluth family in the cult favorite Fox show that spawned a million catchphrases and memes. Walter was 80 years old.
Oh, she was hilarious. Did you ever watch that show, Arrested Development?
I didn't know.
I didn't regularly watch it, but the clips that I've seen, she is very funny, and she is just like a meme queen. But this reminded me, Jill. I know we're going all over the place today, but this reminded me of this other celebrity news that I wanted to mention yesterday. Chrissy Teigen quit Twitter. Teigen said that she deleted the social network and her 13 million followers once and for all, just after years of being harassed and bullied and trolled on that platform. But that's a big deal. She's the highest profile sort of Twitter power user to just bail out on them entirely. And what does that tell you, right? They can't even police that Twitter well enough to keep their unofficial mayor from getting death threats. Twitter, by the way, has just gone completely downhill since Trump left. But this is the reason why I wanted to bring this up is there was this tech hearing yesterday in which Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, and Sundar Pichai from Google, they all testified in front of Congress. The reason why we didn't really make a big deal of it in the podcast today is because if you watched it, nothing came of it. It was just another one of these just mishigas, like everybody yelling, nothing to come of it.
One lawmaker even asked Mark Zuckerberg about something going on YouTube. And he's like, you're asking me about YouTube? And the lawmaker's like, yeah. He's like, okay. Thanks for knowing
It's
I'm
like
the CEO of Facebook.
Yeah. It's like that Progressive auto insurance commercial where where it's like, don't try and become your parents. And the lady's like, I don't know how to turn my iPhone off. And he's like, yeah, you have the button. Everybody's got the button. I feel like that when I'm watching these things with these Congress people.
All right, Carlo, and before we get to Love Hate 8, what do we know about Ricky Olds, who was one of the victims of the Boulder shooting?
So Ricky Olds was 25 years old. She was working as a store manager at the King Superstore. Her uncle remembered her as a, quote, strong, independent woman. He said that she would regularly surprise her family with new tattoos or dyed hair. And he said that she was just getting started in her life. She was taking classes at the local community college, working her way up the ladder at that supermarket. where she was really beloved. One of her coworkers at the supermarket said that they nicknamed her Wendy because she liked to put her hair in braids and that she was always trying to cheer up other frontline workers as they worked at that supermarket through the pandemic, which is just another reminder that a lot of the people who died in that shooting were these frontline workers, or they were these essential workers that were keeping us fed and alive, right?
Yeah, you pointed to Danny Stong, right? Who had
Yeah.
his profile picture on Facebook said something like, "I can't stay home. I'm a grocery worker."
Yeah.
Carlo, thank you for doing that, and a good reminder again about the lives that we lost. It's just incredibly tragic. And not really a good way to pivot to love hate hate, but
No.
here we go. We're gonna end this Friday with a little love hate hate.
It's tough to these are tough pivots. You're right, Jill. Okay, anyway, one thing that we love, listening to sea shanties while cleaning the apartment. Do you know these sea shanties that have been going viral on TikTok? Hold on, I'm gonna try and play one. I'm gonna sing a little riff from it. There once was a ship that put to sea. The name of the ship was the Billy of Tea. The winds blew up, her bow dipped down. Oh, blow, my bully boys, blow. How was that?
Yay! That was good,
Was that
Carlo.
horrible? So
No,
anyway, yeah.
I
So
loved it.
so I've been listening to these sea shanties when we clean the apartment, and I like get out the Swiffer, which is the one of my roles when we do the cleaning, and I just feel like I'm like swabbing the deck of a pirate ship. Very old
I
timey.
could see that. You know what? I didn't know what a sea shanty really was. I didn't know where this was going, but you have just met and exceeded all expectations. I think that was my favorite love ever.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, one thing that we hate when you're Swiffering and you just see how much dirt and gunk comes up on the Swiffer. So we've basically just been walking on that and breathing all that in this whole time. There's something
Gross.
rewarding about it as well, Carlo, but just something so incredibly disgusting.
What did people do before the Swiffer was invented? Did people use like a bucket and a mop in their house, like the way that like the high school janitors would do it?
Yeah,
Because that just sounds
guess
that
so.
sounds terrible. The mop, I mean, ugh. Okay, anyway, one thing that we ate, just straight up mustard. I'm a big mustard guy. I've been having a lot of it this week. We've got yellow, Dijon, whole grain. Doesn't really matter to me. Anytime you can use mustard, it's a first ballot condiment, Hall of Fame in my book.
So this is the behind the scenes of what's going on in Carlo's house. Sea shanties, Swiffering, and just spoonfuls of mustard.
Just mustard. Well, I thought of this because this week I had a couple potato knishes for lunch, which I feel like are an underrated like snack food. They're really good.
I completely agree. I love a good potato knish, and you're right. You got to have
mustard on there.
For sure.
Amazing.
All right, Carlo, we are going to leave it there, though. That is what you need to know for Friday, March 26th.
Have a good weekend, everybody.